I'm Dr. Joey Fawcett, coaching you to grow culture, grow people, and grow profits. Welcome to this month's Work Positive live experience. I want to tell you about a client of mine. Now, the name is fictitious, Maya. Maya took over operations at her regional logistics company 6 months ago. Her first quarter, the team's engagement score dropped from 68 to 41. Her second quarter, two of her 9 days of each other. On a particular Monday, she walked into the break room 3 minutes earlier than usual. Bad idea. Three of her remaining top performers stood around the coffee maker and they had no idea Maya was within earshot. She was the subject of their conversation. She heard words like micromanager and out of touch, and I should have left when Devin did. Maya stopped, turned around, and walked back to her office. And she closed the door. She sat down. She stared at the wall for 9 minutes. Then she did what most of us people leaders do at their lowest point in their leadership careers. she went on AI and entered how to fix a toxic team. You know what she found because I bet you've been there and done it. She found some tactics. She found a few templates. She found some frameworks that were promising 6-week transformations. What she failed to find is what you and I are here on this live experience to discover today. Her team's culture problem was more than a tactics problem. It was a perception problem. And the perception that needed to change to transform first belonged to Maya. Here's the data behind Maya's discovery. Research by Roy Baumeister at Florida State University reveals that bad events carry approximately 4 times the psychological weight of good events of equal magnitude. 4 to 1. Some of the research I've read suggests it's even as much as 5 to 1. So a single piece of negative feedback drowns out roughly 4 times positive feedback. A single difficult interaction with a colleague gets retold at 3 different dinner tables. Psychologists call this the negativity bias. Your brain evolved this bias over millions of years for an excellent reason. And I'm pointing to the back of my head because it evolves from the limbic system, the fight or flight or freeze part of your brain. Our ancestors, literally people who lived in caves, who paid extra attention to negative information, well, they were the ones who survived to become our ancestors today, right? Negativity bias kept your great grandparents alive. But look, that negativity bias, it's murdering your team's engagement at work. Gallup's 2025 State of the Global Workplace report identifies one single staggering financial reality. The global cost of disengagement runs to trillions of dollars annually. That's with a T, friends. You, as the people leader, are the variable that explains the majority of this variance. Translation: your team's perception of work is the highest leverage asset your company owns. Did you hear that? I'm going to say it again. Your team's perception of work is the highest leverage asset your company owns. And the lens that determines that perception is yours. So the purpose of this Work Positive Culture live experience today is for you to cultivate the lens that transforms your team mentally so that they work positive. Now, I understand this is somewhat counterintuitive to the way some of us were trained. For decades, we've been told that culture is downstream from strategy, right? Refine the strategy, roll out the new initiative, and the culture catches up. So how's that working out for you? I bet your best people stopped contributing ideas, didn't they? I bet your meetings just keep getting shorter and shorter. I'll bet your engagement scores keep sliding even as you're working harder. But here's what I've learned from coaching executives: transforming cultures, really architecting a culture over the last 4 decades. The leaders who transform their teams transform their own lens first, and then the team follows. In our time together today in this Work Positive Culture Live experience, I'm going to share with you so that you discover insights from my 40 plus years of experience and wisdom, plus the research of leading minds in psychology, neuroscience, and organizational behavior, including Roy Baumeister, whom I've already mentioned, Barbara Fredrickson, Carol Dweck, whom I'm sure you've heard of before, Daniel Kahneman, Marty Seligman, James Clear, and others who help shape what I call the frame framework. Now, I want you to think about frame as in framing a picture, right? The perception that the artist or the photographer wants you to have lies within that frame. So we're creating your frame so that your perception changes and your team follows on this Work Positive Culture Live experience. We're going to follow Maya, whom I mentioned a moment ago, across her 9-month frame journey from that break room Monday where they were talking trash about her to a Tuesday evening some 12 months later when something happened at her dinner table that she never expected. Now, the framework is featured in this month's little book that we've published, Frame at Work, 5 Lenses that Transform How People Leaders Cultivate Their Team. And I've got a free gift for you wrapped around this book later, so stay with me to the end. FRAME is the acronym for the framework that we're applying today that will help cultivate your lens that transforms the lens and the behavior of your team. Here's what FRAME, the acronym, stands for. The F is for focus the team's attention. The R is for reframe the unfamiliar. A is for affirm what's working. M is for mow the mental broom straw. And I'm going to take you out on my farm here. By the way, if you see any lightning back here, we're having thunderstorms right now. And Maggie May, our yellow lab, is lying here on the floor beside me. She's asleep right now. But if a big boom of thunder happens and you hear someone bark or squeal, it's her and not me. Okay. So F is for focus the team's attention. Focus, right? R is for reframe the unfamiliar. A is for affirm what's working. M is for mow the mental broom straw. And the E in frame is for establish rituals that stick. So let's talk first about focus, and that is focus the team's attention. Vultures fly over the desert looking for one thing, and that's dead animals. Hummingbirds, though, fly over that same desert. Care to guess what they're looking for? Flowers, some blooming off of cacti, others if there's been a sudden rain squall and the seeds popped up and bloomed. Now, it's the same desert, 2 entirely different focuses and 2 entirely different meal plans, right? Your team flies over the same work environment every day. What they find, carcasses or flowers, largely depends on what you, their people leader, train them to look for. Here's the way it works mentally. Imagine with me that you walk onto a dealership lot looking for a new vehicle, and you test drive a white Honda CR-V. Honda, by the way, is not sponsoring this live experience, but I do drive a white Honda CR-V. Okay, so let's say you test drive one like mine. You really like it, but the salesperson and you fail to agree on a price. So what do? You walk off the lot and leave to think about it. Those 3 words that every salesperson shudders to hear. So you get back in your current vehicle and you merge onto the expressway. And guess what passes you going down the expressway? A white Honda CR-V. So you glance at oncoming traffic as you're merging. And what do you see? A white Honda CR-V. You go by the grocery store because you forgot to put a few items on your Instacart order, and you park beside a white Honda CR-V. You think suddenly that there are white Honda CR-Vs everywhere, but are there? No, of course not. What transformed is your focus. Barbara Fredrickson at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill has spent more than 2 decades documenting what a positive emotion does inside the human brain. Her broaden and build theory is one that I highly recommend to you. Go in and look it up and read all about it. It demonstrates that positive emotion does far more than feel good in that moment. Positive emotion actually broadens the range of thoughts and actions that a person considers. So people experiencing positive emotions solve problems more creative. They see more options. They see beyond the white CRV. They recover faster from setbacks, so they're more resilient, and they literally form stronger social bonds. So these are the people who always answered yes on Gallup's Q12 engagement. Do you have a best friend at work? Negative emotion does the exact opposite. What is it does? It narrows the field of attention to a survival-sized window, which is exactly what was happening with the white Honda CRV. Let's listen to Barbara Fredrickson talk about broaden and build and the effect of positive emotions.
There are two core truths about these positive emotions. One is that they open us. They literally change the boundaries of our minds and our hearts and change our outlook on our environments. Now, let me get poetic here for just a moment. Imagine that you're this water lily. It's early dawn and your petals are closed in around your face. If you can see out at all from that vantage point, it's just a little spot of sunlight, okay? But as the sun rises in the sky, things begin to change, and your delicate blinders around your face begin to open, and your world quite literally expands. You can see more. Your world is larger.
Your world is larger. I love it. A team led from a negative focus operates inside a smaller mental world than a team led from a positive focus. And look, you lead more than the work, getting the task done and the accomplishments achieved. You're actually leading attention. Now, let me tell you what this looked like with Maya. Maya's coach, whom you may know, right, assigned her what you could think of as a really simple practice, deceptively so even. For 1 week, Maya walk into every meeting with one specific positive observation about the team and start the meeting with it, lead with it. A specific named observed contribution that was already happening on her team, no drive-by compliments. So Maya did it in the first morning. She stood in front of her team. She was blank. She couldn't come up with a positive thing. And what does that tell us about Maya's lens? She realized in that moment that she had just spent 6 months perceiving her team as a problem to fix. She filed all of those moments of competence and generosity and quiet excellence as background noise because her lens was tuned to find what? The failures of the team. Just like the vulture filed the blossoms, right? Not really seeing them, but the hummingbird saw them and went for them. So Maya forced herself in preparation for the next meeting to remember one thing. Okay. She discovered Roberto, again, a conceived name. Roberto stayed 40 minutes past his scheduled shift the previous Thursday to help a struggling colleague close out a complicated order. Maya came into the meeting, led off the meeting, and named that out loud. She named Roberto, what he did, and why it mattered. Now, can you imagine the look on Roberto's face? It transformed, kind of like that lily on the pond that Dr. Fredrickson was just showing. So did everybody else's face in the room. They weren't used to that kind of positive attention from Maya. The next morning, when it came time for a meeting, Maya had 2 observations ready. Hey, by Friday, she was carrying a small notebook with 6 specific moments of positive contribution from a single week. Here's the reality, friends. You see what you look for. That may be a truth worth writing down, or at least committing to memory. You see what you look for. Maya's team was doing what they always did. What transformed was Maya's perception, the lens through which she looked. She was focusing and looking for the positive activities in her team. So as you know, in these live experiences, I always like to give you a challenge for each of the dynamics in our framework. So here's your focus, do one thing challenge. Before you send out your next team email, Name one specific positive observation about a team member and lead with it in that email. Just one sentence, specific, like Roberto's staying over. Name it, make it public as it's appropriate. What will that single email do? It will teach your team where you now are looking. And what I want you to do is to observe what unlocks in your team. So if you're participating with us live, go into the comment section there, and on a scale of 1 to 10, just tell us how well your current lens finds what's working on your team. Just drop the 1 being the least, 10 being the most. How well does your current lens find what's working on your team? In other words, what's working well on your team? Just rate your lens 1 to 10. If you're watching the recording of this, just jot it down on a piece of paper or make a note to yourself in your own mind. Focus on the positive and filter out the negative, and focus your attention. Your team will follow you. The F in frame is for focus on the positive and filter out the negative. Now, let's reframe what your team perceives as unfamiliar, which is the R in reframe. Reframe the unfamiliar. As I mentioned a moment ago, in case you can see out the window behind me here, we live on a little 22-acre horse farm. We had 4 horses. We're in Virginia. 4 horses arrived here on our farm from a property about 2,000 miles away. Now I think about it, they were in South Dakota, actually. The previous home provided these 4 horses now, a 100-foot by 100-foot paddock to live in. Now, you may not know anything about horses, but you do know something about a 100-foot by 100-foot paddock. So we're putting 4 horses into that relatively small area daily. 3 of the horses were full grown, so they were somewhere between 12 and 1,500 pounds. There was a young colt, so that young colt probably only weighed about 500 pounds. When they came into a 5-acre pasture, now you would think the first thing those 4 horses would do would be to run all over that 5-acre pasture when they got off the trailer. They did not, my friends. The leader of that herd of 4 horses stood basically in one spot the entire first day. That's right. He'd ridden 2,000 miles in a trailer from South Dakota to Virginia. He'd been in a 100-foot by 100-foot paddock for several years. He had 5 acres, and he used about 4 square feet of them the entire first day. The next day, he actually did pick his hooves up and move around a little bit. In fact, he stretched his legs and walked a perimeter. Are you ready for this? A 100-foot by 100-foot perimeter. That horse had escaped his physical prison, but remained locked inside of his mental one. For about 3 weeks, maybe close to 3.5 weeks, he repeated that same hesitant pattern, walking and pacing within that 100-foot by 100-foot pattern. The other 3 horses just kind of followed him around and shuffled around. They looked for some grass in that 100-foot by 100-foot paddock. They had 5 acres until one morning he burst into a gallop, tore across the pasture toward the far fence line, got there, stopped, admired the view for a moment, turned to look back at where he'd been, nickered to the other 3 horses, and they galloped to where he stood. It took him about 21 days or a little over to get his mind locked into the fact, opened up, in fact, to the fact that he had 5 whole acres. Your team, my friend, is like that herd of horses. They are waiting to see where you stand and your behavior, and it's up to you to reframe the unfamiliar for them. In other words, for the horses, it was moving outside of the behavior of a couple of years, 100-foot by 100-foot, to explore the unfamiliar in a 100-foot, from a 100-foot by 100-foot area to 5 entire acres. Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel laureate. His research transformed psychology and I think economics, to 2 of those together, and described 2 systems that are inside the human mind. The first system is a fast, automatic, pattern-loving system. It's running on the rails of the familiar. In the case of the horses, it was a 100-foot by 100-foot paddock. System 2, though, is slow, deliberate, and effortful. In other words, that's what took 3 to 3.5 weeks to get into the 5-acre pasture frame of mind. It was unfamiliar. The application for your team is very routinized, and your team's brain, the team brain, if you want to think about it that way, runs on system one most of the day. And guess what? So does yours. System one sorts every new piece of information and has one question: have I seen this before? If it says yes, it processes it in milliseconds, puts it in a file folder, boom, you're good to go. If no, what does it do with that information? It deletes it or names it negative and pushes it away. That's the moment. That's the moment when it's unfamiliar that your team member says, I or we have never done it this way before. That unfamiliar idea can die in that moment. Your brain prefers the familiar, system one, even if the familiar hurts, whether it's hurting the profits of the company, the success of the team, the productivity of the team. That's why teams stay in cultures so long that slowly kill them. That's why your last technology rollout took 6 months longer than the vendor promised, because all the focus was on the technology, not on the people adopting it. The unfamiliar is not unwelcome because it's bad. The unfamiliar is unwelcome because it's just simply unfamiliar. You've probably heard of Carol Dweck at Stanford. She spent some 30 years, maybe more now, documenting the difference between the two ways that we regard our own abilities. The fixed mindset says my ability set, difficulty proves my limit. The growth mindset says what? My ability develops through effort and difficulty reveals my next stretch. Let's listen to Carol describe it in her own words about the power of believing that you can improve.
The power of yet. I heard about a high school in Chicago where students had to pass a certain number of courses to graduate, and if they didn't pass a course, they got the grade not yet. And I thought that was fantastic, because if you get a failing grade, you think, I'm nothing, I'm nowhere. But if you get the grade not yet, you understand that you're on a learning curve. It gives you a path into the future. Not yet also gave me insight into a critical event early in my career, a real turning point. I wanted to see how children coped with challenge and difficulty. So I gave 10-year-olds problems that were slightly too hard for them. Some of them reacted in a shockingly positive way. They said things like, I love a challenge. Or, I was hoping this would be informative. They understood that their abilities could be developed. They had what I call a growth mindset. But other students felt it was tragic, catastrophic. From their more fixed mindset perspective, their intelligence had been up for judgment, and they failed. Instead of luxuriating in the power of yet, they were gripped in the tyranny of now.
It is a tyranny, isn't it? A tyranny of the negativity. My wife and I, she goes by Gigi and I go by Pops. And by the way, just in case you're wondering, I am the best Pops ever. If you saw me drinking from that water cup. We were with our 6-year-old granddaughter recently, and she wanted Gigi and Pops to dance, and she was going to sing for us. And she said, Pops, I'm a really good singer and my voice is getting better all the time. That's a growth mindset about your singing ability, right? And of course, Gigi and I dance, because how could we not do that positivity, right? That growth mindset. And that's the very thing that Dweck's research demonstrates. Mindset is contagious inside a team. I mean, it got Gigi and I dancing to I couldn't sing the song for you. It was made up, right? So it's contagious when it's inside a team. When you respond to your team's struggle with disappointment, what are you teaching the team? Struggle is shameful, it's to be avoided. Why are you struggling? But when you respond with curiosity to your team struggle and ask questions like, what can we learn from this? What are you learning from this? What can we do better? That curiosity teaches the team one thing, and that's simply that struggle is data. You're just collecting data points at that time. Your team is going to encounter the unfamiliar. In fact, I'm convinced that the pace of the unfamiliar is greater today than ever before, particularly as we're all being told, adopt AI, use AI and what have you. How, what, it's all unfamiliar. So when the unfamiliar appears, say somebody brings up an idea in a team meeting or something like that, your facial expression is the first data point, first source of data that they're going to consult. Their heads are on a swivel when somebody says something. They're going to turn to you and look at you. So let me tell you how Maya applied the reframe practice during a software rollout, her third month in the frame framework. 3 of her people openly resisted the new software rollout for 2 weeks. So she got her team together and says, of course this feels worse than the old system. Our brains are screaming for the familiar, Maya said. The research shows we need about 3 weeks before this starts to feel normal. We're only on day 11. 11 days from now, this will feel like the way we've always worked. Just by naming that and saying, here's a data point, the complaints on Maya's team subsided that afternoon. And by day 23, 2 of the original resistors were teaching newer team members how to use that new system. What had happened? The unfamiliar got reframed and became familiar. They went from a 100-foot by 100-foot paddock to a 5-acre pasture. How cool is that, right? All because of this change in mental perspective. I've written a little book, by the way, called Growth Mindset and Culture. It's available on Amazon. If you'd like to get a copy, it's very inexpensive. Or if you just want to DM me on LinkedIn and ask for a free PDF copy, happy to send it to you. Makes direct application of the growth mindset to your culture with one thing to do for every chapter, because I love do one things. In fact, here's your reframe do one thing challenge. Over the next week, notice one moment in which your team encounters something unfamiliar. And before you react to it, make sure you respond to it instead of react to it. So lengthen the pause, as Viktor Frankl talked about, and just take a single breath and then say out loud, just name it out loud. Say something like this. Of course, this feels hard. The unfamiliar always feels hard. Let's figure out the next best step together. And I want you to watch what unlocks in your team. Suddenly they'll go from a 100-foot by 100-foot paddock to a 5-acre pasture. So what's the most recent unfamiliar thing that your team encountered? If you want to drop that in the comments right now, we'd love to know what that is. Could be a software rollout with everybody getting something with AI built into it, right? Just drop that in the comments. If you're watching a recording, just write it down on a piece of paper or note it to yourself in your favorite way. So the F in frame is for focus on the positive. The R in frame is what your team, you're reframing what your team perceives as unfamiliar. Now, the A in frame is for affirm what's already working on your team. Affirm what's already working on your team. Barbara Fredrickson joined up with Marcial Lasada, and they published some research that examined the ratio of positive to negative interactions inside of high-performing teams compared to low-performing teams. The high-performing teams ran a positivity ratio, positive to negative, of approximately 3 to 1. 3 positive interactions for every negative one. The low-performing teams, they ran a ratio approaching 1 to 1 or worse, like negative numbers to 1. John Gottman's done some fascinating research on marriages, and having been married almost 44 years myself, I could relate to this. Gottman identified a similar ratio. The successful marriages ran approximately 5 positive interactions for every negative one. 3 to 1 for teams, 5 to 1 for marriages. If you consider marriage, relationships, teams, I would err on the side of the more the merrier, right? 5 to 1. Relationships and teams flourish better on a steady diet of affirmation, and then we wither when we're given a steady diet of correction. There are no calories in correction necessarily. Now, somebody's saying, oh, but Dr. Joey, that's so naive. We've got to correct. Okay, yes, we do. But here's where it's not that we don't correct, it's the ratio that needs adjusting. So here's the reality, and this is worth writing down, just like you see what you look for. What you affirm, you amplify. What you affirm, you amplify. Now, so many of us people leaders run our teams at an inverse ratio. We're upside down on the negativity and positive ratios. We're issuing 3 corrections for every affirmation. And then we get in a team meeting, and when we ask for ideas, we wonder why everybody suddenly drops their head like that, right? Well, they stopped contributing ideas because they learned that contributing produces correction more often than recognition. The people leader who reverses the ratio actually reverses the team and their performance. Now, I understand some of us are more naturally wired for affirmation and recognition than others. It's a craft more so than a science, even though we've got the stats to prove it, right? When it's done sloppily, what do you get? You get eye rolls, kind of like 6-year-old granddaughter gives me from time to time, right? You get eye rolls, you get disengagement. People sit back in their chairs and they do this, right? Oh, yawn during your meetings. But done well, affirmation literally transforms and turbocharges productivity and profits. The research on effective recognition is undeniable. It's summarized by Gallup across more than 20 years. They've been collecting work culture data, and they've identified 3 qualities that separate affirmation that lands from affirmation that flops. And I tell you more about these 3 things in this little book, Frame at Work. And I'll tell you more about how you can get a free copy this week in just a moment. First of all, it's specific. Secondly, it's named. Thirdly, it's in the moment. Now, look, great job, team, is none of these. That's just generic. It's unaddressed. It's delayed. I call it a soap bubble compliment or soap bubble affirmation. It's beautiful while it lasts, but how long does it last? About 3 seconds, right? So if you say something like, let's take Maya's example I mentioned earlier. You say something like, Roberto, the way you stayed 40 minutes past your shift Thursday to help Lena close out that complicated order, man, that's exactly the kind of teammate Lena needs and exactly makes our culture what it is. I really appreciate that so much. Thank you. That's all 3. Specific, named, in the moment. Also, your team, well, they can tell the difference. They got sensitive BS meters. They can tell the difference inside of 3 seconds. So let me tell you how this worked for Maya. You remember her Friday notebook, right? Well, Maya's coach, whom you may know, gave her a small notebook as she was in month 2 of Frame and assigned her a single discipline. By the end of every Friday, Maya was to write down 3 specific positive contributions that she observed across her team that week. Each entry was to name a person, a behavior, and its impact. So just 3 sentences. It only take her about 5 minutes once a week. 2 months later, now remember, this is a woman who stood in a meeting struggling to think of something to say that was positive behavior. 2 months later, Maya's notebook was completely full. She told her coach she needed another notebook. She had documented 8 specific examples of Roberto extending himself for all of his colleagues, not just Lena. 6 examples of Lena, who, remember, received the work positive culture behavior from Roberto. 6 examples of Lena solving customer problems with creativity that nobody asked her for. 4 examples of Maya's newest team member, Andrea, quietly improving a process that had been broken for years and nobody could fix. So some of those entries in her notebook became Monday morning meeting opens. Some became one-to-one conversations, and some became thank you texts that Maya sent late on a Friday afternoon, like 4:47 or something like that. Care to guess what happened with Maya's team's engagement by, say, month 3? It went up. Now, Maya did not run a recognition program. She did not implement an incentive structure. She did not increase her budget. She simply affirmed what worked, and what she affirmed, the team amplified. They did more of it. So here's your affirm, do one thing challenge, my friend. This week, look for and catch 3 people doing something well. Each affirmation that you give to these 3 people must be specific, name the behavior, named, use the person's name, and in the moment. Within 24 hours of the behavior is when you want to do it, because much longer than that, it slips from short-term memory. And then it requires being acted on in order to commit it to long-term memory. So that's what I mean by what you affirm, you amplify. You're naming it in the moment within 24 hours of that behavior. And what it does is concretizes that behavior and shifts it from short-term to long-term memory in that team member's brain. So we're just asking, it's a small ask, 3 people, 3 specific affirmations in a week. Get your own notebook, start a notebook, just watch what happens. So which of these 3 qualities, specific, named, or in the moment, is hardest for you? You want to drop that in the comment. Let's say specific is number 1, named is number 2, in the moment's number 3. So just drop that number 1, 2, or 3 in the comments there. And let's just be transparent and see which part of this is the greatest challenge for us, right? That's the place where you really want to work and move forward. So we're looking at the frame at work. We're framing our work and changing. You hear us talking about focusing on the positive instead of the negative, right? The positive within your team. Focus is the F in frame. Reframe the unfamiliar, making it familiar. That's the R in frame. Then you're affirming, and what you affirm, you amplify. That's the A in frame. Now, there's a lot of competition for your team's perception. Some of it comes from negative people on the team. Others of it come from negative people in other departments. Sometimes it comes from the C-suite, and it's the overall culture of the company, at least based on my observations. So this competition for your team's perception and what you're trying to do is transform it, right? I refer to that as broom straw. So the M in frame is for mow the mental broom straw. It looks like it's raining outside, so you can't see very far out onto the pastures here in our little farm. It was a beautiful winter day. I mean, it's still cold, but sun was shining. And so I climbed up on my tractor, which I love to do because my phone stays in the house and it's immediate, tangible results, right? I climbed up on my tractor and I went to mow a portion of our horse pasture. Now you're probably saying, Dr. Joey, you've lost your mind. Grass doesn't grow over the winter. Why were you mowing? Well, that's because broom straw does grow over the winter. What happens is, or so my soil biology, soil science friends tell me, that broom straw grows up when the soil's nutritional balance, the nutrient balance tilt is slightly off. So the grass is struggling to grow even over the winter. And the broom straw comes up to help the soil not erode. So it has a purpose, but the challenge is that come springtime, if you fail to mow the broom straw over the winter. The problem is the broom straw is still there in the spring when the grass for the horses comes back to life and there's competition. So the broom straw is competing with the grass for the same nutrients, the water, the sunlight. And the broom straw has grown up pretty tall while the grass has not grown up tall over the winter. So the sunlight cannot penetrate down to the grass. And so there's very little grass for the horses to eat where broom straw is taken over. The horses literally pick around the broom straw and try to find the grass because obviously horses are going to eat grass. So I get on the tractor and mow the broom straw. Now, if I fail to mow the broom straw wins, the grass thins, the horses get hungry, the pasture stops being a pasture. The same is true of your team's mental environment. Negative perception is like broom straw. It's going to grow where the people leader's lens has yet to clarify direction, purpose, mission, things like that. The negative perception competes definitely with the positive perception. And that sucking sound you're hearing is your team's attention, energy, their emotional resources, the nutrients that you're trying to create can't get to it. So if you fail to mow the negativity, that negative perception, the broom straw, if you will, is going to consume all of your team's mental energy. Sigal Barsada at the Wharton School published research demonstrating that emotions spread inside teams the way viruses spread through a crowded room. She titled a paper that she wrote about it and called it The Ripple Effect, Emotional Contagion and Its Influence on Group Behavior. Now, jot that down or type that into your search engine and go find it. It's a fascinating article. The findings were so stark, my friends. A single team member who arrives in a meeting carrying a negative affect transfers that affect to every other person in the room, and it only takes a few minutes. The transfer happens below conscious awareness. So if somebody comes into your meeting in a bad mood, whether it's their spouse's fault or partner's fault, their kid's fault, their dog's fault, sorry, Maggie May, whoever's fault it is, right? It spreads within minutes. Now, what does this mean for you as a people leader trying to conduct these meetings? And we're talking about starting every meeting with the positive affirmations, right? The positive perceptions. The only mood you really have control over is your mood. So let me ask you up front, how do you walk into a room when your team's about to meet? Do you go in it busy, distracted, scattered, stressed, anxious? Or do you go into it, man, I'm excited about meeting with this team. I can't wait to sit down and talk to them about what's going on, the exciting things, and to collaborate with them and learn from them. Here's the reality, another statement worth writing down. Your team consumes what you fail to filter. Your team consumes what you bring to them. Imagine for a moment with me that you put only 6 grains of sand, just 6 tiny grains of sand, into your gas tank every morning before you start your engine. 6 grains, they're tiny, hardly noticeable. Your fuel filter will catch it, right? Yeah, it will the first morning and the second morning, maybe the third morning. But what's going to happen when that fuel filter gets clogged with sand and starts allowing sand to pass through your fuel injection system? How long do you think it's going to be before your engine fails? It's going to be a lot sooner than you think, I'm afraid. Think of negative thoughts and conversations as those 6 grains of sand. They may seem innocuous when they first start coming, and you're thinking, well, that's not much. It's not hardly any. But they operate inside of your team's collective engine the same way. Yeah, I know those negative perceptions or negative expressions are small and they feel harmless in the moment. It's just like 6 grains of sand, big deal. But do that for 30 days and you got 180. 6 months is over 1,000. And that's when your team's engine seizes. That's when you start wondering, why did my best people stop suggesting improvements? Why are the meetings getting shorter and much, much quieter? Why is innovation flatlined? For you to create a work positive culture, my friend, you as a people leader must be the people leader who mows the broom straw, who filters the sand before it ever gets to the engine or ever stops the grass from growing. Here's something else worth writing down, and this one I carry with me all the time. What you resist persists. Now, that's a common saying if you've ever been in any meditation classes, if you've ever hung out or read any behavioral scientist, what you resist persists is a common statement. So let me give you an example of that. Don't think about, okay, you got me? Don't think about a dancing bear wearing a pink tutu. What just popped into your mind? What kind of dance is that bear doing, right? How big is that tutu? Your mind automatically generates that bear. The instruction to suppress that thought is itself a thought. So it's not going to do it. It's going to run right past the not, the don't, and it's going to go right to that dancing bear wearing a pink tutu. Daniel Wegner at Harvard demonstrated this in a series of studies. He wrote a little book called White Bears and Other Unwanted Thoughts. I just think it's funnier to say a dancing bear and a pink tutu than a white bear, right? His point is suppression amplifies what it tries to silence. My good friend Bob Nickel, who's passed now, he was in Phoenix, Arizona one summer. He walked into a convenience store and he noticed a sign above the cash register. And that sign said, "Don't forget the ice." So Bob, being Bob, just asked the manager how ice sales were going. And the manager says, "Slow. You'd think they would be flying off the shelf out of the cooler because it's 110 outside." So Bob said, "Have you got a marker and a piece of paper?" And the guy said, "Yeah." "Well, I'm going to give you a new sign." So Bob wrote a new sign, "Remember the ice." 3 weeks later, Bob came back into that convenience store, and it was like the manager had been looking for him the whole time. He grabbed him, told him to get himself a soft drink, whatever he wanted. He was just so excited. Ice sales had tripled. Now, why is that? Don't forget focuses the mind on forgetting. You really don't see what Bob called the naughty words, K-N-O-T-T-Y. You don't see don't. You go right to forget. Remember, the ice focuses the mind on remembering. So let me ask you this. What do your signs that you're writing for your team tell them? Are your signs telling them what to forget or what to remember? Are your signs telling them what to fix or what to grow? Are your signs telling them what's broken or what's possible? Now, remember, you're the people leader. You get to write these signs. The team reads them. So, mow the broom straw of negative framing in your own language first and use words of positive affirmation. Remember the ice instead of don't forget the ice. Let me tell you how this worked for Maya. She was in month 4 and her practice was a Monday morning ritual. She invented this herself, by the way. Her coach was most impressed. Before she walked into her office on a Monday, Maya sat in her car in the parking lot for 3 minutes, and she named out loud to herself 3 things she was carrying within herself that she didn't want her team to absorb. And they were things like frustration with the boss's email from last Friday. She worried about Q4 numbers. She was irritated with her daughter who melted down on the way to school that morning, didn't want to go to school. And she sat in her car for only 3 minutes by herself, named each of those. She acknowledged them out loud. She told herself that each one of them, you are real, but you're going to have to stay in the car. Then she got out of her car and walked into the office. And the team noticed Maya's Monday energy had gone way up. And by the third week, they started commenting on it. They just had no idea. They started watching her before she came in. I'm peeking out through the window. What's she doing out there in her car? What they did know, because they could observe it firsthand, was that Mondays in their office had transformed. What was Maya doing? She was filtering. She was mowing her mental broom straw. She was nourishing her team with the nutrients they needed instead of feeding them broom straw. So I want to invite you to do the same thing. Here's your Do One Thing challenge. This week, I want you to over the next week, audit one source of broom straw in your team's environment. Remember, this is about negative perception and things that drag the team into a place of negative perception. Common ones are hallway gossip, the way meetings open so often is just pitiful. Pay attention to your own pre-office self-talk, that inner critic. Just avoid renting space in your head to that negative perception. So once you audit it, once you name that source of broom straw, please mow it for 7 days in a row. And notice your difference here and here. So if you would consider what source you're going to choose this week, right? If one pops in your head immediately, go ahead and drop it in the comments right there. If you're watching this recording or listening to this as a podcast, just think to yourself, if you're driving down the road or if you're on the Peloton or something, just think to yourself, what's a source of broom straw? What's a source of negative mental perception that I'm choosing to mow 7 days in a row? So we're working our way through the acronym FRAME, which allows you to frame mentally more positivity on your team as a people leader. So the F is for focus, the R for reframe, the A for affirm. And what you affirm, you amplify. Remember, we just talked about M is for mow the mental broom straw. Now, let's conclude FRAME with this one. Let's establish the rituals that turn FRAME into the way that you lead every day. One of the habits I established, this was probably 30 years ago, is I get up before sunrise most mornings. That's a little more challenging this time of year because the sun gets up so early. But this morning I was up and it was dark. And I like to read and meditate. And I typically sit in our farmhouse kitchen, which is up this way. And I've got my cup of coffee. And of course, I'm eating my breakfast also, but always a cup of coffee. And I'm looking out the windows that are in this bay window. So we got the large picture frame window, and then we got two windows on the side. The large picture frame window cannot be raised, but the two side-by-side windows can be raised. And so on nice mornings, I raise them. Well, one particular morning I sat there. I find it helpful to meditate with my eyes closed. And I was sipping my coffee and I was just gently rocking. And it's in the rocking chair in which we rocked our daughters and now our granddaughters when they were young. And I realized as I was rocking that the window was shut. It was a nice day. So I reached over and raised the window. And when I raised that window, I heard a bird welcoming the day. I mean, it was the most beautiful song. It was like a symphony, right? It was that gorgeous. And I thought to myself, that bird was singing before I opened the window, but I couldn't hear it because the window was closed. So guess what? My morning ritual, even on cold mornings, now includes opening that window to listen for what? Bird song. One of my favorite books, and I bet one that you read, is by James Clear. It's called Atomic Habits. He draws on decades of great behavioral research and makes it so accessible and easy for us to understand. He summarized a single insight that every single one of us as people leaders really will benefit from internalizing. You and your people fail to rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Let me unpack that a little bit. The people leader who intends to focus, reframe, affirm, and mow the broom straw without some sort of ritual in place to encode those practices will 10 out of 10 times return to old patterns within a couple of weeks. The people leader who creates the practices and encodes them in rituals on the calendar, puts them in meetings and a personal routine, they sustain those practices over years and years and years. And here's the truth worth writing down. Practice creates the perception. Your team has no possible way of perceiving the positive at work when you simply say, you people need to be positive around here. What's your problem? They will perceive the positive at work because you established rituals that train their attention to see it every single day. Martin Seligman, who, by the way, is absolutely amazing, a dear friend of mine, was chair of the department at UPenn where Marty still serves. I like to think of Marty Seligman as the one who founded the field of positive psychology. He developed and tested a ritual that I absolutely love or practice it every day myself. And it's so simple, it almost sounds too good to work, right? He calls it 3 good things. And he published his research in American Psychologist, and discovered some amazing things that comes out of this practice of 3 good things. So let's listen now as Marty describes this practice he calls 3 good things.
The 3 good things exercise has you write down for a week before you go to sleep 3 things that went well today, and then to reflect on why they went well. It works because it changes your focus from the things that go wrong in life to things that you might take for granted that go well. And focusing your attention on things that goes well breaks up depression and increases happiness. I don't need to recommend beyond a week typically for 3 good things, because when you do this, you'll find you like it so much, most people just keep doing it. We ask people to write down the causes because we want people to reflect on and immerse themselves in the good events. So to the extent that you write down the cause, you're thinking in more life review detail about the quality of the event.
I just realized that we've had so many good things in this time together that our hour is about up. So thanks for this time. Let me give you your establishing the ritual of 3 good things and other rituals like that can take on the practices that you plan. Just choose one ritual from this hour. We have given you several do one thing challenges. This little book has one for every chapter. Choose one practice, make a ritual of it, and just commit to doing it for 21 days. Now, you heard Marty say that with the 3 good things, he rarely has to encourage anybody to do it past a week. I've done it every night when I'm going to sleep. I write in my gratitude diary 3 great things that happened that day and why I love them so much. I do that every night right before I go to sleep. So let me just encourage you to focus your team's attention on the positive, to reframe the unfamiliar, to affirm what's working, to mow the mental broom straw, and to establish rituals that stick, and use rituals to do those first 4 stages. Just make them rituals, routines that you do all the time. I'm sorry I took all the time today. We don't have any time for Q&A, but go on LinkedIn, find me and send me a message and just ask me your question. I promise I read every single one of those and I will reply to you. Also, I promise you a free copy of this little book. It's on Kindle this week if you're watching it live. Today's July 22. It's on Kindle this week and you can get it absolutely free. If you're watching the recording and you miss the free window, it's only $2.99, or you can still get it free if you send me a message on LinkedIn and say, hey, Dr. J, I want a free PDF copy of Frame at Work so that I can read more about how to create a positive mental attitude and perception for my team. Do that. And also, if you want to go to our website, workpositive.today, that's a great place to find other free resources like the Work Positive Culture Assessment, which is there for you to help you dive into understanding your team and your company culture better. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely phenomenal to share this with you. Obviously, I'm pretty excited about helping people work positive, and I invite you to join me on the journey so that we all can grow culture, we can grow people, and we can grow profits. Thank you so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you next month.